James Brown here with Barton Springs Mill, working today from the home kitchen to show you a new recipe, Torta Della Nonna, grandmother's cake made with Barton Springs Mill premium AP flour. If you like the content that you're seeing today and you'd like to see more of these recipes, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to find out more about the other recipes we'll be presenting in this series. We're going to get right to it with mixing our pastry cream. I'm going to remind you to do one small task prior to this, which is get your butter out of the fridge, get it cut into small pieces, and let it be sitting so it softens slightly. The first thing we have to do is zest one lemon, and we're going to do that directly into the pot with a microplane. And take your time doing this. Make sure you get all of the zest off, just the outer bit, trying to leave the white pithy parts behind. Into this, we're going to add our milk. This is 2 cups, 8 ounces, or approximately 453 grams of milk. And then in a separate bowl, we're going to mix the following ingredients. We're going to mix our eggs. It's 3 egg yolks. Our sugar, 30 goes in there, 30 goes in with the milk. We also add our flour. This is 24 grams of the Barton Springs Mill Premium AP. And we're ready to go to the stove now. I have my pot with my milk, my lemon zest, and my sugar in it, and we're going to bring that up to a simmer on the stove here. And while we're waiting for that, in this bowl I have another 30 grams of sugar, the BSM AP flour, and my 3 egg yolks. Just going to mix these together to incorporate so that we don't get any lumps. Okay, our milk's just at the simmer, so I'm going to turn off our heat, and we're going to temper this egg mixture so that we don't scramble it by adding a little bit of this hot mixture while stirring. Just getting the eggs used to the idea that they're about to be hot, so we don't have scrambled eggs in our filling. So now we can go back into the pot. Resume with the heat, and we're going to whisk this until thickened. It's going to come to the consistency of really loose whipped cream, I would say. It's not going to get super thick, but we're going to bring this up to close to a boil, and it'll thicken up pretty quickly. Okay, you can see now that it's starting to thicken. It's not going to get much thicker than this, and we don't want to scramble it. Okay, now we're ready to go to the fridge. We're going to place a piece of saran wrap on this and place it down directly on the surface of our filling here so that it doesn't form a skin. Okay, we're ready to head on to the pastry, and I have scaled already into my bowl 300 grams of Barton Springs Mill Premium All-Purpose Flour, to which I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and the zest of, you guessed it, 1 lemon. Now for the fun part, we're going to incorporate our eggs and our sugar, and we're going to whisk those for 5 minutes until light and fluffy, and so that it draws a slight ribbon. You can choose to do this in a mixer or by hand. Today I'm going old school and I'm doing it by hand. This recipe has special significance for me because I learned it on a trip with my wife's extended family to Tuscany a few years back. Someone who's now continued to be a good friend, Fato Nazeraj, shared this recipe with us for Torta Della Nonna, grandmother's cake, that was taught to her by her grandmother. So, paying homage and honor to this recipe, I haven't made any adaptations for things that I learned in culinary school or baking and pastry. I am just religiously transmitting to you what was taught to me, and I think that's the best way. The net result is fantastic. This is an instance where doggedly sticking to grandma's methods works best. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, almost beige color and sort of a consistent ribbon as it falls from the whisk. So now we're ready to incorporate this into our dry ingredients and just mix to combine. Okay, once we get to this stage, we're going to go from spatula to our hands. You'll see we have sort of a dry, crumbly mixture here, which is perfectly fine. That's about to change when we start incorporating our butter. And I'm going to incorporate about 1/4 of this. And then we'll incorporate these with our hands until they're reasonably well incorporated. And I'll show you a picture here of what it sort of looks like. A little bit swirly. You can still see little bits of butter. What we're going to do now is get it into a disc. And we're going to put this in saran wrap and get it in the fridge so it can rest for at least 30 minutes. At this point, we're ready to preheat our oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. So now we're going to start forming our dough for the bottom and top. We have our disc that's come out of the refrigerator. That needs to rest after mixing for at least 30 minutes, preferably 45 minutes, so it's thoroughly chilled. It gives the flour an opportunity to absorb some of the fats, both from the eggs and from the butter, and just makes rolling so much easier. The custard, which is going to go inside, also needs to be thoroughly chilled. What we want to do is have very cold filling going into the oven so that just as the filling comes up to sort of a coagulation temperature around the temperature that it might potentially scramble, the outside is done and we get it out of the oven. If your filling is still warm, it's going to get too warm during baking, and it will detract in a small way from the texture of the finished product. Okay. Now, a little bit of flour, and we're going to start rolling out. Our goal is as quickly and efficiently as possible, get this rolled out to the right size before it starts to warm up. Fold it in quarters, locate your center, and flop it out. Now take some time to coax this down into the corner. As you can see, you're going to have some dough left over. I highly recommend holding on to that and cooking it later as a shortbread cookie. It's amazing. So we're going to let that flop over the side for now, and we're going to turn to our filling, our thoroughly chilled filling here. Okay. Now for the top. So now we need to seal the edges around this. You don't have to get too uptight about it, just a little pinch around the edge, and it will largely self-seal in the oven, but we're going to give it a head start. And once we've got it crimped, we take our rolling pin. This part we save for cookies later. Now we punch some holes in this with a fork. You can either pave, that means completely pave or encrust the top of this with pine nuts, or you can use blanched almonds. And we're ready to go to the oven. You're going to have some dough left over. I highly recommend holding on to that and cooking it later as a shortbread cookie. It's amazing. Okay, here we have the finished product. You'll notice I set myself a ramekin down so that I could release the ring. That's a handy tip. We're going to wait for this to cool completely before slicing. The recipe from Grandma recommends that you place a towel over it while it's cooling. I presume that's as the steam is escaping. It probably helps to soften the crust a little bit. The final touch is to place some powdered sugar on top. And there we have it, Torta alla Nonna. I think Grandmother would be proud.